Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 8th of July. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Iran has made a new bid to unlock the dispute over the timing of the nuclear restrictions and sanctions relief, two key elements of the deal being negotiated in Vienna. And meanwhile, the talks go on. IBA's Ellie Wogelenter has the story.
A new constructive proposal to overcome the remaining differences was submitted by Iran yesterday to the P5+1 group of negotiators. Tehran's leaders want Western countries to start lifting sanctions against its oil exports and international banking ties as quickly as possible once the deal is done, if possible even before Iran has taken all the agreed steps to curb its civilian nuclear activities. An Iranian diplomat was quoted saying that despite the new proposal, Iran will not show flexibility regarding its red lines. Both sides agreed yesterday to extend yet again the deadline for ending talks, this time until Friday. Chief diplomats from most of the countries involved in the talks had left Vienna by this morning, except U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Zarif. However, the foreign ministers from Britain, France, and Germany were expected back by the end of today, and negotiators said their leaving does not signal the end of talks.
So don't get too excited if you see ministers leaving. They might come back. They will come back. And it doesn't mean that we are stopping the work we're doing inside. On the contrary, we are having our teams back at work on the texts, and we might have coordination meetings still in the coming hours. We are still working very hard to finalize this agreement.
British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said upon his departure that there was a range of issues still to discuss and some difficult decisions would have to be made, but that there was a clear will on both sides.
There are a range of issues where there are political discussions that need to be had, and there will need to be some trade-offs. There will need to be some difficult decisions made on both sides if we're going to get this done. But I think there is a clear will on both sides now to complete this agreement and to keep at it until we get there. We've reached a point in the discussions where there is now a piece of drafting work for officials to do, and there'll be continued discussions during the night and into tomorrow at political director level.
The White House said that extending talks with Iran afforded an opportunity to address significant differences between the two sides.
As Secretary Kerry himself said back on Sunday, we have never been closer to reaching a final agreement than we are now. But there continue to be some significant differences that remain. And this is a view not just of the United States, but this is the view of all of our P5+1 partners as well. So that's an indication that these talks, at least for now, are worth continuing. And that is what's driving this decision-making process. And so, we're focused on the quality of a potential deal. We're focused on the usefulness of continuing to talk. And we want to be sure that the joint plan of action remains in place.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continued to criticize the emerging deal with Iran, arguing that the world powers are caving in to many of the Iranian demands. Speaking at a memorial ceremony marking 111 years since the death of Theodore Herzl, Netanyahu said the capitulation agreement that Iran is about to receive from world powers is paving the way for it to arm itself with nuclear weapons and to carry them further with the missiles that it continues to develop and, of course, to spread terror. Ellie Wogelenter, IBA News.
The High Court of Justice today accepted the request by former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to postpone the start of his prison term pending appeal. After the former leader was convicted of corruption charges in the so-called Talansky affair, he was sentenced to 8 months behind bars, due to begin tomorrow. Olmert has petitioned the High Court to overturn both the sentencing and the conviction. If the justices ultimately rule against him, Ehud Olmert will become the first prime minister to serve time in Israeli prison. Turning to the Greek economic crisis, and Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras today assured the European Parliament in Strasbourg that he will deliver sweeping reform proposals in time to meet Europe's final deadline for agreeing to terms of a new bailout by Sunday. During his 12-minute speech, the 40-year-old leader said that he's determined to fix years of bad government and reverse what he called the increasing inequalities in his nation caused by 5 years of creditor-imposed austerity. He vowed that the proposal will include credible reforms based on a fair sharing of the burden with adequate coverage of the country's financial needs and strong investment program to combat unemployment and the encouragement of entrepreneurship. Tsipras' address followed remarks from former Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who now chairs EU summits. He warned that the stark reality is that we have just 4 days left to find an ultimate agreement, and that even though until this time he's avoided discussion on the issue, he now says it has to be said loud and clear that the final deadline ends this week to keep Greece from crashing out of Europe's currency bloc and into economic ruin. We've been reporting on murmurings in the Supreme Court over the petition from Yesh Atid arguing that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's holding of the Health, Communication and Foreign Ministries is against basic law. Joining me now in the studio to discuss whether a major shakeup may be imminent is Hebrew University political science professor Avram Diskin. Thank you for coming in this afternoon, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, let's start with something really simple. Is it or is it not against the basic law for a prime minister to head multiple ministries?
Well, I read the law once again because of this program, and I couldn't find anything like that in the law, although it can be interpreted because it is said there, actually since 2001, that a minister is a minister, not a prime minister, is in charge of a ministry. Okay? But doesn't say anything about the prime minister, and the routine is, since 2001, and actually since the establishment of the State of Israel, that prime ministers do hold ministries. You know, it's nothing new. Ben-Gurion, Sharet, the two first prime ministers, held other ministries, etc., etc. So there is nothing new here, and it happened several times with Netanyahu, and with other people since 2001, so really I don't find it in the law. It can be interpreted that way, but I must say that it is quite strange.
So you think we're going to have to wait to see how the Supreme Court rules on this?
It's always a gamble. It's always a gamble, but what I have to say that what we had yesterday is really ultra activism, because the appeal concerned only the Ministry of Health and the Deputy Minister Litzman, and Hanan Meltzer, Judge Meltzer, turned to those who handed the appeal and asked them to correct it and to appeal about the other ministries as well. So that's not simple activism, it's really ultra activism. But you know, Meltzer does have a political background, does have a background as a judge. So I don't know how it's going to end. There were also expressions in previous appeals of Eliakim Rubinstein, who is part of this group of judges, and also of Salim Jubran. So it's really a gamble. I would say that it's a big mistake. I think that it's a wrong expression. It can hardly be interpreted that way in the law. It is definitely against what we had in the past since the establishment of the State of Israel. And I think it's once again another round of, I would say, conflict between the Knesset, the government, and the Supreme Court. Really an unnecessary collision.
Okay, just very briefly, I just quickly want to ask you about, some would say that the coalition is so far giving in to all the ultra-Orthodox parties, starting with the cancellation of the conversion law. Do you think that next we're going to see the nullification of the law compelling Haredim to serve in the army?
I don't think so, and to the best of my knowledge, this year the numbers were highest in many, many years in percentages and in numbers. The only thing that was already cancelled, that's the criminal punishment concerning that. That
Right.
was already changed. I don't think that we're going to have any major change concerning that issue.
Professor Avram Diskin, always good to have you with us. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, there's good news for male IDF recruits. Starting this month, the length of compulsory military service will be reduced by 4 months. This is the first in a series of changes that newly instated IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot is planning to carry out. We get more in this report from IBA's Dennis Zinn.
Are we preparing for the new, leaner, meaner army that successive IDF Chiefs of Staff have been dreaming of for decades, but were unable to implement? Probably not, but for all sorts of reasons, not all connected to IDF requirements. Starting this month, service for male recruits will be shortened from 3 full years to 32 months. In order to make up for the backlog in manpower, hundreds of key personnel, including elite fighters and other highly skilled soldiers, will be enticed to prolong their service by additional pay. The Chief Medical Officer has decided to be more flexible regarding the physical profile needed for the less physical combat units, such as the Armored Corps, the Artillery and the Home Front. This will allow less fit soldiers to fill those ranks. Several programs, such as the preparatory course for officers' school, will be shortened. Some will be cancelled. The Army will also stop assigning troops to the other branches of the security establishment, such as the Mossad, the Shabak and the police, and the prison service. These organizations will now have to find their own sources of auxiliary workers. According to IDF sources, the new arrangement will create a shortage of about 6,000 soldiers per annum, and a third of those would be combat troops. Also, in order to partly make up for the shortfall, the IDF plans to demand that women's service be extended by 4 months, from 22 to 26 months. Women's organizations have long been calling for equality between women and men in the army, and for them, this would be a step in that direction. In another move not connected to the shortening of service, the Army announced that it would be creating a new commando brigade, which would be made up of an amalgamation of elite units. The brigade will include some of the most highly skilled and rapidly deployable soldiers in the IDF today, but all under one roof. Some analysts have compared the new brigade to the Rangers Regiment in the United States Army. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
The Israel Law Center is hosting 65 attorneys from around the world for an intensive course about how to defend Israel from the BDS campaign to demonize the Jewish state. IBA's Aria O'Sullivan met with the participants and brings us this report.
Appeal to emotions, explain context, use visuals. These are just some of the tools these international lawyers are being told work to defend Israel and confront the boycott, divest, and sanctions organizations undermining Israel.
This is a conference of lawyers from all over the world, from Canada, United States, Belgium, France, Italy, coming to Israel to learn how to become an activist lawyer, how to defend Israel, how to fight the BDS movement, how to defend IDF soldiers from war crimes. We're teaching them and giving them the tools that they will need to protect the state of Israel in their local states.
Sharat Adin, the Israel Law Center, organized the conference, and 65 participating lawyers met with their top scholars and experts during their week here to hone their legal activism.
Every single day, we get phone calls and emails from lawyers from all over the world who want to come and help, who want to volunteer their time, who want to volunteer their skills, their talents, their education to come and fight on behalf of Israel. They are tired and sick of the situation. And we figure that if we bring them here and we teach them what to do, they can go outside to their own communities and take the fight on their own.
The attorneys say that they are motivated by a sense of injustice being waged against Israel and intimate the BDS movements don't even care about the Palestinians.
I sometimes question whether the BDS movement actually cares about the quality of life of the Palestinians. For example, SodaStream. BDS attacked SodaStream in the last year for having a facility in the West Bank or in Judea and Samaria. Well, who did that facility employ? Palestinians, who had a much higher wage than the average Palestinian. And as a result of the BDS movement, SodaStream closed its facility in the West Bank and moved to the Negev. So who got hurt? The Palestinians got hurt. The average Palestinian got hurt. So I believe that the BDS movement is more interested in destroying Israel than they are supporting for the Palestinians.
There's no hint of BDS there yet because that hasn't come to Singapore yet. But I've heard certain parliamentary speeches which seem a bit lopsided when it comes to the Palestinian issues. It's just one or two stray MPs, but I'm on my history. I've never heard, my time there. I've never heard it. So it's becoming a growing issue because nowadays, I'm a university professor. What alarms me is that people decide by their emotions and use their reason to justify it, and not thinking clearly. And I think if you have no viewpoint diversity and no clarity of thought, you're going to go down a very dark road. So part of my job and my responsibility as an academic is to teach my students how to think, to be provocative, to be critical, and not to be politically correct.
In many ways, these attorneys will be a vanguard to take the battle against BDS to the enemy.
Legal proceeding is very costly, not to one side but to the other as well. And this is why we called all these lawyers from all over the world that we will not be the only one who do it. Because people are willing to volunteer their time, they should take these cases and file them. We will inspect them, we will direct them, we will teach them what to do, but this will be the task force. For now on, it's not going to be only Shuraddin in Israel with maybe 10 or 15 lawyers. It will be an army of hundreds of lawyers that want to fight back.
Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
One of the murderers of taxi driver Derek Roths is now a free man. Arbella Loney was released from the Rimonim prison today after more than 21 years behind bars. He and his friend Moshe Ben Igvi were both 14 years old in 1994 when they shot Roth in the back of the neck while riding in his cab in Herzliya Patuach. It was a case that shocked the country because of the young age of the killers and the senselessness of the crime, which they described as random. The teens were originally sentenced to 16 years imprisonment, but were each given another 5 years after they robbed an elderly woman during a furlough. Ben Igvi remains in jail to serve out the rest of his sentence that was put on hold when he fled during an additional furlough in 2004 to Argentina, where he was arrested on robbery charges and only returned to the country in 2013 after a lengthy extradition process. The Histadrut Labor Federation has threatened to launch a general strike in 2 weeks' time if there is no breakthrough in negotiations with the Finance Ministry over the issue of contract workers. Histadrut Chairman Avi Nissenkorn declared the intended work stoppage at a press conference last night, where he complained that there hasn't been any progress in talks over the ongoing labor dispute since it first erupted in November of 2014. He went on to accuse the Treasury of attempting to destroy the nation's labor infrastructure by employing an increasing number of temporary workers who are given inadequate contracts with poor salaries, substandard labor conditions, and almost no benefits. He vowed to not give up until the issue is resolved. If the strike does go forward on July 22nd, it could affect all public services, including the airport, seaport, government offices, and educational facilities. A long list of unionized companies would also be affected, as well as private industries where workers belong to the unions, such as cellular and insurance companies. In a rare and somewhat strange outburst, Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon slammed real estate investors who purchased more than one apartment. While speaking to reporters, the Treasury chief accused the sector of being inconsiderate to young couples who can't afford to buy their own property. In statements directly to the investors, he shouted, "You can't live as if you're alone in this country and hog all the land," and he urged them to share and think of others in addition to themselves. The unexpected criticism came during a press conference the finance minister gave over his latest efforts to bring down the rising cost of housing. Now, taking a look at local finance, and the shekel today put in a mixed performance in foreign currency trading, as did share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. You're looking at the afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team tells us we can expect fair conditions and slightly warmer temperatures tomorrow. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow, and I'll be back to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.